Hi pals and welcome to a new video. I'm Kate and today I'm talking about the most fun I've had reading historical fiction in I think years, and it is a review of The Pretender by Jo Harkin. It's only February obviously, but this is my favourite book of the year so far, and I think probably will be as good as it gets for new releases. This will be a spoiler-free review, and at the end I wanted to briefly talk about the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction. This has recently been longlisted for the 2026 prize. Let's go ahead and get started with a very brief synopsis of The Pretender. The Pretender is set in the 15th century in England at the tail end of the War of the Roses. Richard III is on the throne and the princes are in the Tower. On a farm near Oxford, a young boy called John Colin is being raised as a peasant farmer, except he might actually be Edward, Earl of Warwick, a Plantagenet, son of the Duke of Clarence, and in the line of succession to the English throne. Over the course of the novel, John assumes a lot of different identities. He is John the peasant farmer, he becomes Lambert, Simnel, Edward Plantagenet. And I think the most important thing to note with The Pretender is that the central question at the heart of the novel isn't can he or will he take the throne of England. The question is, who is Edward and does it even matter? And it also asks how you can come to know yourself when who you are is constantly redefined for the purposes of others. That is all I will say on the plot, and I mainly wanted to focus this video on my thoughts on The Pretender. If you can't tell, I thought that this was the most remarkable, accomplished and unique novel I've read in quite a while. It really captured my heart from almost the very first page. You know how sometimes you start a novel and you just immediately know it's going to be for you? That's what happened with The Pretender for me. And I think what really sets it apart is its really unique style and tone. But I do want to add a big caveat to say that The Pretender is not interested in historical realism. I've seen this compared to Wolf Hall quite a lot, and I think that that's really mischievous marketing. The Pretender is deliberately anachronistic, it's playful, it's irreverent, it's a bit of a romp really. It's also quite crude and bawdy in places. For me that works because I think it captures the spirit of the late medieval period, and also is appropriate to the age of the characters when we meet them. I really value historical realism. I adore Wolf Hall in large part because of that. The Pretender works though because it fully commits itself to the bit and maintains that spirit fully throughout the novel. And I do think it's well researched. There is a lot of detail in here, but it's not for purists. If you're really into the War of the Roses, early Tudor history, you might be a little bit frustrated with this one unless you can enter into the spirit, that playfulness of the novel. The closest comparison I have to this is an instance of The Fingerpost, a historical fiction novel that I also really adore, which I think captures the spirit, the tone of the novel, the intellectual curiosity behind it. But even that comparison I don't think is a perfect one. One of the things that really reeled me in when I was reading this and really captured my imagination was the language. The writing is really inventive, it's earnest, it's full of heart and spirit, but most of all, it is genuinely funny. And I feel like it's incredibly difficult to write a novel that actually makes you laugh. It's such a rare thing to find. The writing really has a distinct and imaginative turn to it. It's peppered with period details, so words or phrases from the late medieval period, but the writing itself is still very modern in tone. I think that really works because it captures the spirit of the time and yet it still feels really modern. One of the things I also loved about this is how infused and inspired by literature it is. Edward undergoes an intensive education while he's in Oxford and Burgundy to elevate him to kingship. And he discovers a real love for literature, for reading, and throughout The Pretender, he's reading Horace and Ovid, Dante, Chaucer, and Malory. And the novel becomes infused with this literary awakening, but you're seeing it through the eyes of a child discovering these things for the first time. In the Guardian review of this, the reviewer noted that is in large part to show the formation of the late medieval mind, how the characters in the novel think and why. And as I've mentioned, this is genuinely one of the funniest books I've read, maybe ever or just in such a long time, but it is really quite sad in parts too. And that is because Edward and his various iterations throughout the novel is the means to an end. He's a pawn for more kind of powerful and influential people. Everyone around him is scheming, there are plots and counterplots, there is court intrigue, there is spying. In the early parts of this book, when he is a very young boy, he is very innocent, devout, painfully sincere, very naive. But with every iteration of his character, something is taken from him. There is a pervading sense of uncertainty in The Pretender. As I mentioned earlier, the central question to this isn't will he take the throne? It's who is Edward, and does it matter whether he is a peasant farmer or he is a secret kind of Yorkist heir to the throne? The holy grail of historical fiction for me, and what I think all truly great historical fiction novels do, is suspend your sense of knowing and the sense of the inevitable outcome. Because I know my Kings of England, I know my War of the Roses history and my Tudor history. I know the outcome of this novel before I've even started reading. And a truly good historical novelist for me creates their characters and writes their novels in a way where you can suspend that knowing and still feel a sense of like jeopardy and suspense. Jo Harkin does that so well in this. I would say the one weakness to The Pretender is the last maybe like 75 pages. It kind of feels like she's struggling to wrap everything up and close the novel. It just loses a little bit of momentum and becomes a tad repetitive. That being said, the like emotional end of the last maybe like 10 pages I think really works. So it's not completely perfect, but I think this is her first historical novel. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Before I close the video, I wanted to talk about the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction. I'm not a big prize reading person, but this is probably my favourite. And on the one hand, I can't believe that I haven't seen more people talk about this novel. On the other hand, it has just been longlisted for the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, and so I'm really hoping that this will start to get the attention that I think it really deserves. This is the first book from the long list I've read, and so I can't give context or comparison to other novels on the list. Just from reading experience, I would be really surprised if there's anything as good as this on the list. I do have Helm by Sarah Hall on my Kobo. I'm really excited to read that. Her previous novel, Wolf Border, I really enjoyed. So that is one that I'm going to head to. And I also think on the long list, Once the Deed is Done, looks really interesting, but I'd love to hear somebody else review that before I go ahead and buy a copy. In terms of the rest of the long list, I'm gonna wait and see what other people make of it before I pick anything else up. I never read all of the long list or the short list, but I do think that there's always 2 or 3 brilliant novels in there. Right, that's it for today's video. As ever, I would love to hear from you in the comments. If you've read this, I would really love to hear from you, or if you've read anything else on the long list. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye!